Welcome to the Grow Your Money podcast, where we're on a mission to change how we talk about money. Our fireside chats are the heart of our show, bringing the energy and excitement of in-person events straight to your ears. We aim to connect you with inspiring voices and stories that matter, sharing relatable experiences and insights that will transform your financial life. Everyone deserves access to practical financial knowledge, so we're making money conversations relatable by inviting guests from all walks of life to share their real-life experiences with money. But this isn't your typical money show. We look at the emotional, psychological, and cultural factors that shape our relationship with money. So hit subscribe and join us for another episode of the Grow Your Money podcast.
Hello, everyone. It's amazing to be here again. Second time with Muna. You must have been really good the last time on the podcast. And a massive welcome to you, Giles. A very important conversation, especially this week. And I'm really keen to dive in. I love the work you guys do. And so that I don't butcher anything, I'll let you introduce yourselves. Giles, do you want to go first?
Cool, thank you very much. Yes, hello, my name's Giles. I'm a director of campaigns at UK Finance. So UK Finance is the trade body for the banking and finance industry. We've got around 300 members of all different types of financial institutions. And one of the campaigns that we run is a campaign called Take 5 to Stop Fraud, which is all about giving people straightforward, impartial advice on how to stay safe from fraud and scams.
Nice. Very important work, especially now more than ever. We were running something with students, like international students, and it's horrifying the number of people that get involved in, get scammed. We've been listening to some horror stories, to be honest. So it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
important work. Thank you, Giles. Muna?
I'll introduce myself again. Hello, pleasure to be here. I'm Muna Yassin. I'm the CEO of Rooted Finance. We are a community-based debt advice organisation based in London, and we provide end-to-end debt advice, financial education, support for people who are in financial difficulty, and really work not only with individuals but also partner organisations to think at structural inequalities within the financial services system. And we really see ourselves as an economic justice organisation.
Thank you, Muna. It's awesome to have you. We really thought meticulously about who we're going to have for this particular episode because it's one that's really close to everything that's happening with the economy, and that it's around safeguarding your money in the UK, and immigrants or migrants' insights into avoiding debt, enhancing financial well-being, and the most important thing is protecting against scams, right? Scams and fraud, especially in the ever-changing environment, AI, machine learning, everything that's happening, financial concerns, and then you have the added issue of having to think about, staying alert, right? So it was really important that we had people who do this in the day-to-day. And so thank you so much for coming on. Muna, I would like to ask you a bit about your journey, how you came to Rooted Finance and how that looks like, what you find with your clients around the debt journey.
Yeah, so Rooted Finance is a new brand, but obviously we have been delivering debt advice since 2001. So we started off as a tiny little pilot project in Tower Hamlets, working with housing associations and really thinking about the link between rent arrears and over indebtedness, and using rent arrears as an early indicator of multiple debt issues. And so we were working on the ground, just really exploring the role of priority debts to people's personal financial situations. And then we kind of transitioned out into consumer debts and looking at all areas of people's financial lives. And debt advice then, back in 2001, and I'm showing my age, was not regulated. It was much more around debt counselling and how you can support people around their behaviours, but also working to set up repayment arrangements that were sustainable and affordable. The landscape has changed significantly, and we now have better regulation, but also I think the economic situation has worsened considerably for the communities that we're working with. So initially we were looking at things like irresponsible lending and too much credit. We're now in a position where people are unable to pay for their basic essential needs. There's much more destitution. We are now issuing food bank vouchers like we've never before. And we're having to think about, it's not just about the individual, what about the system around them? So for the last 3 years, we've kind of been focusing on structural inequalities, and really using the breadth of our experience over the last 20 years to be able to help make some of those systems changes.
That's worrying, isn't it? More food bank vouchers being given out is just because normally it's just a sign of where everyone is at, isn't it? It's if you're having to resort to food banks and there's a big uptake of that, it's just concerning on the whole. Thank you for sharing that. Giles, please tell us about UK Finance. What is it, and what is it?
So yeah, the UK Finance, it's the trade body for the banking and finance industry. So we have a range of different members, from some of the kind of high street banks to some of the kind of credit card firms, and a range of different ones that offer sort of commercial finance and those sorts of things as well. So about 300 members. Really, we're here to sort of represent the industry and kind of get the best for the industry, best for the customers as well. So that's the kind of the aim for us. And from our campaigns perspective, very much around for Take 5 is really about kind of helping try and protect people from fraud and scams. It's as you know, it's a very difficult issue, and criminals are always changing the way they try and target people with the kind of different types of scams they're trying to commit. And so trying to help educate people about what some of the signs might be of a scam, how to stay safe, is a really the kind of vital part of tackling fraud. And obviously there's a lot that the industry does as well to protect people and safeguard people's accounts, and watching out for suspicious transactions and all those sorts of things that's going on in the background continuously. But I think it's important to have to make sure that people have the skills as well to be able to watch out for what might be what might be a scam, because ultimately I think we all want the same thing, which is to stop money getting into the hands of criminals and then going on to do even other things as well that money is used for. So that's our real aim, is to try to stop it happening in the first place.
Really important work. And I wonder what you both see in the trends. So Muna, from the clients you're serving and working with, I've just shared that, with the students we are seeing and working with, we are seeing a lot of scams. I wonder if there are any trends that you're seeing with your clients, Muna. And Giles, your top advice around that. What's the advice you give people, and how can the listeners avoid scams altogether? Muna?
So I think it's important to have a distinction between clear scams where people are trying to defraud people, and actually exploitation that people fall into because of their circumstances, and so where they're paying higher prices. So we see a lot more of people having a poverty premium or ethnicity premium, and they're having to pay more. So the ethnicity premium is what we class as people of color, effectively having extra costs and barriers to be able to access financial products and goods. But we also know that there are predatory schemes and scams that operate rapidly on digital platforms that our minority communities use a lot. So things like WhatsApp and TikTok and these other platforms. I think there is something around people's lack of basic education around financial literacy. And that's not to say that they are unintelligent or have no literacy at all. It's about specific financial literacy and the way that the system works and how things are being promoted to them that are too good to be true, and making sure that people understand that actually that criminals use finance as a way to be able to gain access to people's whole digital lives, and protecting their data in a way that ensures that they're not opening themselves up to that. I think there's an issue around digital literacy in itself amongst the communities that we're supporting, and therefore ensuring that people understand where their data is being used and how it can be exploited by consent, and safeguarding their own data through consent levels. And I think we see a lot of things where people are susceptible to scams that hold dear to their heart, for example. So there will be bogus charities that are setting up support back home in a home country, for example. There are bogus schemes and campaigns to support people of a certain ethnicity. So just really ensuring that people do their due diligence and understand, is this a front? Is it a secure site? What's the kind of safeguards behind this platform that's doing this? And also, I think education is massive. So we work a lot with our communities around just ensuring that they've recognised that actually, if you sign a dotted line, that is a consumer credit. If credit is offered to you, there are regulations around it, and it has to be secure credit that's offered to you. So, it's becoming more prevalent because of technology, and I think it's becoming something much more difficult to safeguard against at scale. We're working on the ground and working with communities, so I think there's a responsibility for larger institutions to take much more of a lead, and I'm sure Giles and the work that they're doing with some of their members can help with that. But I also think it's a responsibility on all of us as a society to ensure that those scams are called out, and we're making sure that people are not exploited.
Absolutely. And I think it's quite key to call out exploitation as well, especially for people who are moving to country. When you're new to country, you know nothing about your rights as a tenant, for example. We covered in one of the episodes, not knowing that your deposit is supposed to be secured,
Yes.
or paying inflated deposits. So all these types of things can fall under exploitation. And you're very susceptible when you're new to an economy, new to a system. Giles, I wonder what themes you're finding and what your top tips are in that area.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, I think that point of exploitation is really important as well. I think what we see is something called money mules, where someone is really, tricked really into having what is effectively stolen money. So it's often the proceeds from other fraud, but transferred through their account to really, launder it. Essentially, it's to try and clean it to clean it up. And criminals will target people. Sometimes they don't know what they're doing. They're offering like a job where it's like a money transfer agent or something like that, where it's a quick way of earning some money, and all they say is, all you need is if you've got a bank account, all you need to do is just accept a bit of money into your account, you can often take a small cut for yourself and then transfer it on. That's your payment, and then you transfer on the rest. In fact, that is a crime, and the criminals are trying to exploit people into taking part in that and help them try and launder the proceeds of frauds and other crimes. And that is something that is can be targeted. Obviously, people, as you say, that might not necessarily know what they can and can't do or shouldn't do with an account, and so that is definitely something that we see and is a real problem. More widely, you're right as well, that online is a really more and more scams are taking place online. About 3/4 of what we call authorized push payment fraud, and that's where effectively somebody is tricked into sending money from their bank account into an account which the criminal controls, and 3/4 of authorized push payment fraud start online. So whether that is through social media, other online platforms, through auction websites, those sorts of things, a lot of fraud starts on there. And in terms of that authorized push payment fraud, the biggest proportion is purchase scams. It's effectively where criminals advertising something that doesn't really exist. It could be electronic products, it could be a holiday, it could be anything really, and they usually try and pretend that it's a great deal. So there'll be a cut price offer, it's a last minute deal, you've got to act now to secure this, but 2/3 of authorized push payment fraud are purchase scams, and it's a large amount of money stolen as well. £85 million stolen last year through purchase fraud, so we're talking significant sums of money. Yeah, absolutely. Overall, the APP fraud, there's about £460 million was stolen last year. So, it's a lot of money that the criminals are stealing. And the advice of the Take 5 campaign is, as you were saying, actually doing that due diligence, but it's very much stop, challenge, and protect. So stop. If you ever really asked for your personal information, your financial information, for money, take that moment to stop and think, because criminals will try and impersonate anybody. They'll pretend to be your bank, they'll pretend to be the police, they'll pretend to be a utility company, HMRC, anybody really, to try and rush and panic you into doing something. They might claim there's fraud on your account. They might claim that there's a warrant out for your arrest, or you've got an overdue tax bill, or a parking ticket, or a delivery that has missed. There are all different ways to try and trick you into giving away your money or your information. So, before you ever do that, just taking that moment to stop and think, is this genuinely my bank? Is it really the police? Taking a moment to just think, should I really be doing this? It can help try and break that spell that the criminal's trying to put you under, to try and rush and panic you into acting. And then challenge, it's okay to reject, refuse, ignore requests. People are often very polite, and criminals will try and take advantage of that. And everyone wants to help. Somebody asks for something, you go, yeah, that's fine, here you go. And actually, it's often in our nature to try and do that. And actually, what we want to say is, it's okay actually to say no. If you're not sure, hang up that phone, don't reply to that message, don't click on that link. If it's a genuine organisation, they won't mind. Only a criminal will try and really rush and panic you. And then finally, protect. So if you do think you've lost money in a scam or had your details stolen, contacting your bank straight away and reporting it through to an organisation called Action Fraud as well. So Action Fraud are the police's central reporting point for fraud and scams. So that helps them kind of build a picture of the criminals behind this and then go after them.
Interesting. So Action Fraud, does that account for fraud? Is that when fraud has actually happened, or can I report a suspicion of fraud as well?
You can report suspicion of fraud as well. Yeah. So it's often, if you have actually been a victim of fraud, but yeah, if you've been approached and you've got something, you can report it through to them as well. So whatever it is, really, it's a suspicious phone call or text message, you've got the details there that helps them build a picture of it.
Absolutely. And it's so easy. I think the criminals normally time you at your lowest. It's like, what you were saying, Muna, they'll time something that's close to your heart or an event that's happening in your life. So I remember putting something on Marketplace up for sale, and someone approached me to say, oh, I think it was a cart, They say, I really love the cart. I cannot come to, collect it myself. So I'm going to send you money. You need to pay the delivery guy because of whatever, and then you send me the difference, right? The rest is for the thing, and if there's any less, send it back to me. I'm like, well, then you're too far for the item. But that typically, if you're desperate to sell this cart, you're going to jump at that. So it's, again, like my husband always says, sleep on it. You don't need to make a decision immediately. Just sleep on the matter. It's never that deep, as the kids say these days.
And I was just going to add to what Giles was saying. Those three themes are what we speak to our clients about. Authority, urgency, and empathy, right? So that's what they mimic. They mimic authority. They claim to be from the tax office. They claim to be your bank. There's always urgency. You have to act now, otherwise you miss out, or somebody's going to be in a difficult position. And that empathy point, so just as you were saying, Tynah, people acting like they are in a position of need when they really are criminals behind it, or asking for a cause. So, we use Action Fraud, and we are constantly looking for new scams that are being targeted at particular communities, and then highlighting those to authorities. But it is difficult because they are constantly evolving and constantly changing, and technology allows them to do that. And I fear AI is just going to amplify that as that gets more sophisticated as well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think we used to always think that you could easily spot a scam. We all know those emails that you used to get where someone suddenly come into millions of dollars, and they picked you to as your bank account that you need to look after it for them. And it's obviously that can seem like a scam, but things have changed so much now, and right, with AI things become even more sophisticated about how those scams can approach you. But the point you made actually about the fact that urgency point, that's there are telltale signs, whatever they're trying to do and different tactics they use. There are always those little telltale signs about how they're going to try and target different people. But you're absolutely right. I think the technology is making it easier. And we're all really busy. People have really busy lives, and and we know that, when you're distracted, that when you've got lots of things on your mind, when you had a busy day, that it's easy to let your guard down a little bit. And sometimes, when you haven't quite got that moment to just take a breath, that might be when you're potentially more susceptible to to being scammed. And so I think really sometimes just acknowledging that as well, sometimes thinking, actually, if I am, that type of feeling like that, feeling under pressure, feeling busy, that giving yourself an extra bit of time just before you make those decisions is really important.
I mean, we talked about WhatsApp and similar apps, the people have been really, really caught up in this, where someone calls you up and they say, hi, where I'm part of the such and such group that you're a part of, and we have a meeting tonight. I've sent you a code. You need to confirm whether you're going to attend the meeting, but you knew nothing about the meeting. And then you always think, especially when you're like, in my case, I feel like, well, I should know better, right? But when they phone you on the way out of the house, you're running late for a meeting, it's someone, you recognize the group. It's so easy for you to give them that pin. So it's always thinking, right, okay, no, I should not be giving anyone any, like, I need to stop, literally just stop. If we have the meeting tonight, I can get back to it. That's so important. Yeah, I want to take us to a topic that both of you should contribute on, because I'm quite keen to understand, Giles, from your work, how this leads into debt sometimes, and how you navigate that when you've been scammed and it's led to debt. But before that, Muna, please talk to me about debt, what you're seeing around debt in the community. And also, a very important thing that I'm keen to understand is, how does someone know that they're going to go down a spiral of debt, and how can they stop themselves? Because you find yourself sometimes just in the middle of it, already caught up. Or I wonder how it works when it's a case of you've been, scammed out of your lifetime savings and now you're starting from scratch. Let's talk a bit about that. Muna?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting about that spiraling, because there are telltale signs and people feel it, but there is an element of denial. So the first thing to say is that debt is something we all have. Any payment that's in arrears is technically a debt, and we manage it. But the issue becomes when it becomes unmanageable, and it can quickly spiral into problem debt. And I think the gap between manageable debt and problem debt is a lot shorter and a lot smaller than people actually give it credit for. So all it takes is one income shock or a family event where your income is affected, and you can very quickly find yourself in some significant debt problems. I think the key thing to look out for in terms of signs or spiraling is, are you struggling to meet your essential needs? Because that's a massive indicator. So if you're using credit cards to pay for your shopping, if you're using borrowing to pay for your rent, these are small signs that you are down a road that's going to become unsustainable and unmanageable further along. And I think there is something around, we're in a cost of living crisis, people are struggling on a daily basis. So I think there is something around sitting down and looking at your income and expenditure and being honest around what's coming in, what's going out. And if there are things that you can pare back on, that's the time to do it. But if there isn't, because many people, their income is not covering their essential costs, recognize that the earlier you seek advice, the better it is for you in the long run. And I think lots of people try and manage debt problems to the point where they become completely unmanageable. So if you start to see that you're struggling, definitely seek advice from a free debt advice organization, money advice organization. Look for information online. But I think one of the things that what's a sad reality is that you have a subsection of our society that are consistently struggling because of poverty and because their income does not cover their essential needs. So if you live in London, housing is your biggest cost, transport is immense, and the wages in London do not cover that. So it's only natural and it's only rational that you are going to start accumulating debt because you do not have enough income to be able to maintain your day-to-day life. And I think I'm going back to that point right at the beginning when we were talking about 20 years ago. It was about irresponsible borrowing and lending and consumer, and we lived in a kind of bling bling society where it was all consumerism. It's not there now. And I think there's something around people still attribute debt to individual behaviors,
Mhm.
and people therefore feel that there's a stigma attached to them, or there's a shame in reaching out for help. And the reality is it's happening to millions of people across this country. There are people that are working full time, have very good jobs. You can have a life event, you can have a disability, you can have a long-term illness. So there should be no shame in seeking support. And we always say you're only one step away from being able to help yourself manage your debt. So we would definitely advise people to seek that. The other sad reality is that people of colour tend to have more persistent debts, and tend to have more priority debts than the wider population. And that is a huge indicator of the levels of poverty within some of our minority communities, but also some of the systemic inequalities within our financial services systems. And I think there's something around ensuring that people receive culturally appropriate support and advice. Because one example I can give you is that we have clients who, if you are of a African disposition or an Asian disposition, we all have responsibilities to family members back home. And I'm of that second generation where I've never lived in Somalia, but I still have responsibilities through my parents to people who are my family. And there are people that are sending money home on a regular basis, and they have core responsibilities. Our financial services systems and our kind of standard financial statements do not accommodate for that as a core financial commitment. And so people are in a position where they're having to hide those things. But actually, if it's baked into their budget, you're allowing them to be seen, and you're allowing them to have realistic financial plans and goals that allow them to get out of their debt much quicker. So I think there are things that we can do as a kind of sector to improve the services that are provided to minority communities. But I think there are structural inequalities that we all have to work together on to be able to support them more holistically. And yeah, the cost of living crisis and the way that things are going, I would always urge people, if they are slightly struggling to meet their essential needs, that's a very early indicator, and to seek help as soon as possible.
Muna, there's a great area around when you're a person of color or when you're new to the country, you don't feel entitled to anything. Typically because of so for example, if you're on a visa that you're allowed to stay in the country, but it says you have no recourse to public funds and that sort of thing, there's a stigma around that and a lack of understanding of what seeking support looks like. So you find that many people will not go out and look for help. What is the official position on that? Can anyone that's in the country go and find debt advice from Rooted Finance or anywhere? Or are there restrictions around guidance you can get?
No, anybody can attend and seek advice from assistance advice or a Rooted Finance. The difficulty becomes around the support that can be provided to them. So if you have no recourse to public funds, for example, the ability to get statutory support is limited. Obviously, you cannot increase their income through benefits. That's open to other people who are not within that restriction. But there are services around charitable support, food banks, fuel banks, and there are things that you can support those individuals with. So there's no restrictions for asking for help. I think there's a massive stigma around and demonization and misinformation around what help new immigrants get. They're taking our jobs, they're taking our housing. The reality is they have access to a very meager allowance on a monthly or weekly basis. And in actual fact, they have more need than what they are taking out of the system. So I would absolutely encourage people to seek help and to go to their local authority or local citizens advice, or they can contact organizations like Rooted Finance.
Yeah, that's important to mention, because many times you find someone that's been struggling for a few years that's never been anywhere to ask for help. Thank you for sharing that. Giles, I wanted to know what happens when I've been scammed. I mean, I've been scammed out of my life savings. I'm now in debt or whatever. What recourse do I have, and what guidance do you have for someone that's in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the first thing to do if you've been scammed and you've lost money in a scam is to speak to your bank straight away. So the quicker you can speak to them, the better. But that gets the kind of the process started, and as I mentioned earlier, also reporting it through to action fraud as well. So the bank will always try and get the money back. They'll try and follow the money as it's through the system. It is difficult because it does often move really, really quickly. So it doesn't simply just go from one account to another account and sit there. It will be moved through the system really quickly. So tracing that can be difficult, but they will always try and do that. About 2/3 of the money stolen in what we call authorized push payment fraud, that we talked about earlier, is reimbursed to victims of scams. So about 2/3 of losses, and that has been increasing each year in terms of the proportion that's been stolen. There's actually going to be changes coming in October, new regulations that are coming in that will mean that virtually in almost all kind of situations that people will be reimbursed. So if it's a situation where it's you've transferred the money, then that is that. If you spot something where the criminal has stolen your bank card or accessed your account in some way, and they undertook the transaction themselves, there's actually different rules already for that, and you will get your money back in that situation. So it does slightly depend on the nature of the nature of the scam. But as I say, currently or last year, around 2/3 of the money stolen in authorized push payment fraud was reimbursed. But we can be talking about quite significant sums of money that can be stolen. And you're talking well about shame earlier as well. And actually, absolutely anybody can be a victim of fraud, and they should never feel ashamed for that, because it can happen to anybody. And I think sometimes people might be worried about speaking to other people, speaking to their bank, speaking to them, and just think, okay, I'm just going to I don't want to talk about it. But actually, I think speaking to your bank is really, really important, and also speaking to other people too. Actually, it's not only is it a financial loss, but it's an emotional impact as well. Fraud and the effect that it can have on people. So seeking the support that's out there to help with that side is really important too, because we know that the impact that it can have.
So Giles, that's interesting because two things. So when you've been defrauded or scammed, and for example, you're feeling so ashamed because that's a very big thing. In the case of someone who's a migrant or new to country, you probably don't even have anyone to tell that will understand. It's like the weather conversation. You're constantly going on about the weather. It's raining here. It's sunshine, 40 degrees. Like, what are you talking about? There's that situation. So there's a portion of society that will just always never have the right fit for them. But in terms of even when I go online and I think I've been defrauded, the way the forms are worded makes it feel like I'm not going to get reimbursed if it was my fault. So the bank will ask you something like, was it you that made this transaction? And the answer is yes, I did, but I've been defrauded. So I think there's a lot of education to be had around that. So just so anyone that's listening to this understands us, whether you actively took part in the scam, as in you gave your details away, there is still recourse to get your money back.
Yes, there could well be. Yes, so even if you kind of sent the money, so if you press the button on sending the money in a transaction, there is still ways of getting your money back. As it stands, that doesn't happen in every single case, and banks will always look at individual cases on a case by case basis. But for many of the big high street banks, there's a voluntary code in place which sets out the situations where a customer will be reimbursed. But as I was saying as well, next month these new regulations that are coming into place means that will increase even further. So the proportion of people that will be reimbursed. There are also other organisations as well as your bank. So there's an organisation called Victim Support. It's a charity that helps victims of crime, not just necessarily fraud, but all types of crime. But they can also help as well in that sort of situation, and just in terms of providing some advice and support for particularly on that kind of emotional side too.
That's awesome, because if you're someone that you don't have family, you don't have anyone to talk to, you're talking about the rain, it's sunny type of person, then you can speak to someone, and they're called Victim
Support.
Victim Support. That's
Yep.
awesome. So we'll share all the links to this because it's really useful, very useful guidance and knowledge, because again, there's that shame around it. You've been frauded. You're the one, you give them your details. It's a lot of money. You just leave it and you end up in a spiral. And so what about, or do you see any debt then that is a result of scams? Or in your case, is it that you're guiding people to let them know there's recourse to get the money back? Or have you seen cases where it ends up turning into debt?
It can do, unfortunately. I mean, often I suppose if it's a case where someone has been defrauded and they've some money, it's obviously money they had to start with, but then it's what happens next often. And so obviously that money was going to be being used for something. It wasn't necessarily just sitting there. So it's the impact afterwards. It's that what the other kind of things they would need to pay for, that money was going to be used for. So it's that sort of it's the flow that goes on from that, really, that you can see. So I mean, there is, I think, speaking to your bank, explain the situation. I think that is really help. They do want to be able to be there to help as well.
Yes, and I think we're always so afraid to talk to. We don't realize how interconnected things are. So if you've been, defrauded, for example, you've been scammed, your thought is, okay, even if you decide to speak, you're going to go and speak to the bank. But that's an opportunity to speak to another person that owes you money. So your electric provider, your phone bill, anything that's being affected, it's literally the same phone call. But we don't think about it like that. You're so hung up in the fact that, oh my goodness, I've been scammed, whereas there's all these ways. Thank you. That's very insightful. Muna, I want to go back to the issue around debt, and I have two questions for you. Talk me through a debt plan. Like I have debts. I'm on the food bank stamps. I mean, you've talked about fuel stamps, which I think are not as common. People don't know as much about those. But what do you advise or what do you guide your clients around debt planning? And then how can they reach out to Rooted Finance? And please talk to us about that.
Yeah, and before I do, I was just going to come back on that point that Giles made around the after effects of being scammed. So that money was for something. So what tends to happen is people are so ashamed that they've been defrauded, they then absorb those costs, and that leads to a debt spiral. And we've supported people through that. But thinking about a debt management plan, so for every client that comes to Rooted Finance, and this happens across the whole debt advice sector, you will have a assessment of your situation, and we tailor our assessment to include not only your current situation, but also how you got into debt. Is it a short-term issue? What are the emergency needs? Where are you in terms of your financial well-being at the moment? And then we'll use that to identify any emergency support that's required before your appointment. So, for example, that could be you have a court case coming up or an eviction, putting any holds in place, any needs around food insecurity or fuel insecurity, so issuing food bank vouchers and fuel vouchers or any other kind of financial assistance support that we can provide before you attend your appointment. And then typically in your appointment, it's an opportunity for your advisor to really understand your whole financial situation. So the key imperative there is to understand, okay, what's your income and expenditure? Can we maximize your income to begin with? Establishing your debts, then sorting them out into priority and non-priority. So typically your priority debt is something that has a more severe consequence. So if you don't pay your rent or you don't pay your mortgage, you can lose your home. But if you don't pay your credit card or you don't pay your personal loan, yes, it has an implication on your credit score, and it will have long-term implications on your kind of access to credit, but it will not leave you homeless and it will not evict you. And so that's the way that we would look at it. So non-priority debts are put to one side and priority debts are looked at first. And then depending on the client's goals and aspirations and what they would like us to do, because we take instructions from the client. So what we will do is we'll say, these are your options and these are the solutions that are available to you. And then our advisors will work with them to implement those solutions. So that could be a breathing space moratorium. It could be accessing more support around evidence collection. So somebody's got a mental health condition or a long-term health condition, getting all of that evidence to be able to support any solution that we implement for them. And we go all the way from obviously setting up a repayment plan, but all the way to doing insolvency. So supporting somebody with DRO or a debt, a bankruptcy. And interestingly, we had a case yesterday in the office where we had a client who really struggle to engage because of obviously the shame, stigma, psychological anxiety, everything that comes with being in debt. They wanted to go for bankruptcy. They had 121 creditors. 121 creditors. So you can see why it took so long to engage, because of the level of problems that they were in. And our advisor had to kind of do lots of coaching and mentoring to get them to that point. A significant number of those were parking fines. A significant number of those were their priority debts. But also it totaled over £70,000 worth of value debt. And obviously that's above the debt relief order threshold. So we were going for a bankruptcy option for them.
Sorry, Muna.
When I talk about sorry.
Did you say parking tickets?
Some of them were parking tickets.
The parking tickets come under debt then?
Yes.
I've never viewed a parking ticket as a debt.
Yes. So parking tickets, when they are sent to a bailiff, an enforcement agent, and they are sold off, they will become debts. So what we then had to do was think about actually, and this was then coming back to the point around some of these systems that are not created to support people who are in difficulties. It will cost you around £700 to declare yourself bankrupt. It's the fee that you have to pay. And we can apply to charitable grants to help us do that, but that takes time. So we have been supporting this client through food bank vouchers, so she can put a small amount aside for her to be able to get the money together to be able to apply for bankruptcy. And yesterday our advisor, she was in the office, a bag full of paperwork to go through the bankruptcy form and finally get that through. So you can come in for one debt, you can come in for a couple of debts, you can come in for 121 debts. It's that level of support and that level of process that we will go through for every client. But it's about working with each person individually to understand what is their situation, what is the right solution for them, and what support can we provide them. But yeah, 121 debts. Creditors is obviously extreme, and we don't see that very often. But it's also giving you an idea of how people bury their heads in the sand, become truly affected by the situation they're in, and it just continues to rumble on.
Totally. We'll share the details for Rooted Finance and how to get in touch. And just to add that it's a free service for the clients that you consult with, right?
It is. It's a free service, and obviously we're a small organisation with capacity, so there is eligibility around where you are, but contact us, and if we can't help you, we can pass you on to someone who can.
Totally. Thank you so much. Giles, we identified some of the top scams that people of color are most likely to be targeted by. We found there were advance fee scams, impersonation scams, romance scams, which I found interesting because the depiction of social media is that it's the people of color in other countries trying to get romance here, but turns out that there's romance scams as well. And then there was also something around investment scams. Does that check out with what you're finding as well? And if so, is there like a general guide around those separate to what you've already shared?
Yeah, they are all kind of common types of scams, unfortunately, and they're all kind of different, very different in nature. Advance fee, where somebody is, we're really asked to kind of provide some money up front to get something further down the line. That can be, for a delivery or something, but it could also be, for example, for a loan. An offer of a loan. You need to pay, a certain amount. They'll claim you need to pay a certain amount of money up front to get it, and then you pay the money and they disappear. It can also be things like lottery wins that supposedly you just need to pay a bit of money to get to kind of unlock your winnings. Again, it's unfortunately it's a scam. The romance scams, you say that often starts online, and someone will try and build a relationship with somebody else. There will be a fake profile, and actually it does often take place over a long period of time. It's not necessarily a quick scam. They will spend the criminal invest quite a lot of time, not having any sympathy from whatsoever, but they invest quite a lot of time in trying to build that relationship with somebody, and then eventually they will invent a reason as to why they need money, and they might pretend that it's for an operation, or it's for a flight to come and see them, and they just need some money to be able to pay for that, and then they'll be able to they'll be united. One of the common parts of that is they refuse often to obviously either to meet in person or to do things like video calls, things like that. So they will try and keep it purely sort of text based. So that can obviously be a sign of that. And often actually those payments, often those types of scams occur over quite a long period of time, and actually multiple payments as well. So the average romance scam case has about 10 payments as part of that, and they try and do it, and often might start with a small sum and then make it larger and larger as the scam goes on. Impersonation scams, where it's as it sort of suggests, but it's the criminal pretending to be someone they aren't, essentially. So that two common ones are the bank and the police. With the bank often claiming that there's been fraud on your account, that you need to act now to protect it, and they want to often try and get you to transfer money from your account into what they claim is a safe account, which they claim they've set up to look after your money. It's not a safe account. It's nothing. It's not one you control. It's one of the criminal controls. And bank or the police will never ever ask you to transfer money from one account to another account for fraud purposes. So never listen to that. The other kind of police scams, sometimes they claim that there's a sort of an operation that they want you to take part of. So it might be a secret operation. They'll say that either potentially that you need to go down to your local branch, withdraw cash, and then hand it over to them, and they're claiming that there's that the bank staff are handing out fake notes or something like this, and they need you to go and be part of the operation to hand over some of the evidence they claim as part of that. Again, it's a scam. The police would never ask you to do that, and not ask you to undertake an undercover operation, but they make it sound so genuine, so real. And we were saying earlier that emotional impact, that someone wants to try and be helpful, and someone, the police is like a position of authority, and people often trust that, unfortunately. So that is another one. And then investment scams can happen on a range of different things, but it again, often online. It can be for anything from crypto, so cryptocurrencies, and people kind of wanting to invest, and often can start with quite small sums of money. But it can be things like gold, or even things like wine and things like that. It could be anything, to be honest, that a criminal wants to try to entice people in with. What they sometimes might do is even pretend to show you some returns in the first place. So they'll set you up with an account on a site. They'll ask you to transfer in some money, and they'll pretend that you've made some money on it. They'll pretend you've doubled your investment, and they say, well, if only you can invest a little bit more, you'd make even more money. And then you do invest in more, and then they just disappear, and there's no more contacts, and they run away, and they've taken your money. So they're all different ways, essentially, of obviously trying to get hold of people's money. And that advice really of taking that moment to stop and think really helps all those. If you're ever being asked by somebody you don't know for money or for information, just stop. Take a moment, speak to somebody else, speak to a friend, speak to a family member, just get a second opinion. Especially in romance scams, taking that moment to just speak to somebody and go, oh, I've just met somebody online and they're now asking you for money. Does that sound about right? Actually, someone will say they'll be able to just show that it might not be. It might be a scam. So, getting a second opinion, whoever it is, of course you can speak to your bank. But if you're more comfortable speaking to a friend or a family, when you talk it through and you take that moment, you can often sort of break that spell that the criminals trying to put you under.
Very useful. Thank you so much. And when you were talking there, I was thinking about the romance scams as a typical one that falls between the scamming and the exploitation, because you're emotionally involved. There's a lot of shame related to it, especially when you're going with someone who's younger than you or older, whatever the case may be. So it actually borders on both the scamming and the exploitation, and that's why it takes a really, really long time and a long cycle. So that's one to definitely look out for. It's been such a useful episode. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you both that I just have to ask. How is AI and the whole, technology playing into the fields you're working in that you see? So, Muna, in your case, in the debt industry and that, how's AI? Is it creating more debt? Is it helpful? Can it be a thing? And Giles, is it supporting? Is it reducing crime or increasing it? What's that? Because that's the buzz now. It's like AI is doing everything. It's taking the jobs. Is it creating the scams and the deaths? I just wonder what your thoughts are.
Shall I kick off? So I think AI is interesting. At the moment, it feels like it's a opportunity for organizations to improve and efficientize the work that they're doing. So we are working, as you know, we've been developing a kind of debt management app and case management system with our partners Elifinti, really utilizing smart technologies to help the agency and the control of our clients to be able to manage their debt journey, and integrating and utilizing smart technology to be able to have instantaneous conversations between the client and the creditor and the advisor, and really bringing that ecosystem onto one platform. And that in itself, using smart technology, is bringing some real efficiency gains and some allowing us to be able to do what we do quicker, less resources, and more impact for our clients. It's never going to replace that one-to-one relationship between an advisor and a client, because I think, Giles, you mentioned the emotional connection that people have, and the emotions that they go through, either through a scam or a debt. It is an emotional journey, and I can't see AI replacing any emotional situations at all at this stage. I might come back in 10 years' time and regret that, but at the moment I can't see it. But I think it's about how we utilize it to enhance the service we're already providing. Also, how do we future-proof the services that we're providing? Generations are now becoming much more used to using everything online. The scams are online, so if we want to counter them, we have to deliver services that are just as easily accessible and as useful to people. We are now just starting to think about how AI can be incorporated into some of that, and we're just exploring around the edges. But at the moment, I think for me and for the sector that we're in, for the client group that we're working with, AI is actually causing more harm through scams and quick fixes and solving things, and actually putting people into a false sense of security that they've managed the situation, when in reality they haven't got through to the root causes of what the issue is. So come check back with me, Tynah, in 5 years, and we'll see what's going on.
Thank you so much, Muna. Giles?
I mean, I agree with a lot of that, really, well, all of it. I think, it's there are definitely opportunities that AI can bring in terms of, there are, in terms of fraud, there are, millions of transactions taking place every single day, and being able to sift through those to spot the ones that potentially could be fraudulent. There's a lot that goes on already to do that, but I think, the more sophisticated the technology behind that, the more that can be done to sort of, spot the suspicious transactions. The flip side, I guess, is that the criminals can use that same technology themselves too, and to make their scams sound more authentic. And we see things like deep fakes already, and the amount that you can do in terms of creating fake video and audio of people. That's going to only become more sophisticated. The amount of audio of somebody that you'd need to be able to mimic them, or a video to be able to mimic them, is reducing. And so somebody, unfortunately, at the moment we get scams at the moment, the WhatsApp scam, the hi mum, hi dad, I've lost my phone, or I've broken my phone, here's my new number, I'm stuck somewhere, I need some cash. It's all done over a message. But if somebody has a bit of somebody's voice, you could maybe do that with a voice in future. So it's just going to make it even harder to be able to spot what's a scam and what isn't, unfortunately. So I think it's I can see definitely benefits in the fraud prevention side, but again, unfortunately, criminals always try and take advantage of the latest technology too.
Thank you so much. It's been an amazing episode. I think the most encouraging thing, because they're such dark topics, debt and scams. They're just sad, shameful topics typically. But the biggest takeaway is that there is help for anybody and everyone. That just go and ask and stop and check. And it's okay if you make a mistake or you're in a trap. You can always come out on the other end. Thank you so much, Muna and Giles. It's been an amazing episode. Until the next one, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Grow Your Money podcast. If you're looking to take actionable steps toward achieving your financial goals, visit moneymatix.com. That is money, MATIX.com. And join our free Grow Your Money Challenge. Let's unite in the movement to inspire people to talk about money. Thank you for being a part of our community. We'll see you in the next episode.